The Joe Biden administration in the United States has finally agreed to help India battle the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of supplies of raw materials for vaccines, in terms of supply of ventilators. Now, this came after, a few days of confusion about why the Biden administration was not coming forward to help. And then finally, yesterday, it seems that this particular decision was reached upon. So Noinima Basu, who covers diplomacy for The Print, is with us in Government Matters today to help us understand what really happened in these days, why this confusion in the middle, where the US received a lot of flack in India for not coming to the help of its ally, and what really transpired behind the scenes. Noinima, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ruhi.
So, as I said, the past few days were a bit confusing on this front. There was, a lack of clarity on what was really happening as far as the Biden administration is concerned, why there was this, what seemed like a reluctance to help India in this hour of need.
So Ruhi, first thing, yes, we have been hearing for last at least 4-5 days how the pressure was sort of, being built on Washington, and the fact that they had to really act, and people were calling, not just in the US, but also in India, to come and be proactive and help India when it is undergoing, such a tremendous kind of a crisis, where we are seeing not just, in terms of COVID numbers, but also deaths happening. So yes, the expectation naturally was that, being these natural partners, US will come to our help, but then there's a lot of confusion happening also in terms of when did India seek help, at what time did we speak with the US administration, what was the messaging that was going to them. So all those are some of the areas which were confusing as of now.
So we'll come back to what happened behind the scenes, etc. But just to give our viewers some context, what has the US government finally said? What has it agreed to?
So the first thing that started when, Adar Poonawalla of Serum Institute, he tweeted directly to Joe Biden seeking lifting of restrictions on the raw materials for vaccines. That's when the issue started to, get a lot of highlight. And it came under the limelight that what is it that the US is actually doing, and that point of time in numbers in India were already rising. India has really no time to sort of look at what was happening at that point of time. But then, yes, there were reports, and The Print also carried the report that early March, Mr. Poonawalla had written to WHO that there are restrictions on the raw materials. However, what the US is now telling us, and yesterday the statement that came out post the conversation between both the National Security Advisors, Ajit Doval and Jake Sullivan, and we also know that External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar had a word with his counterpart, to Antony Blinken. The fact that, firstly, under the DPA, or the Defense Production Act that they have of 1950, India wanted exception on that because it is basically under that law, India was not being given the raw materials that it needed. Now, apart from that, the US has also stated that it will give us ventilators, probably oxygen generators, PPEs, and several other kits and critical equipment that we need at this point of time to arrest this rising number of COVID cases.
Right. Okay. So, Noinima, I did want to ask you a few more questions, but I think I'll sort of ask you those later, because we already have quite a few questions coming in from our viewers. Let me take some questions that have come in on Twitter to begin with, or comments. There is this question or comment from Rohan R. Shirasat. I don't think the delay is what has angered us, but the root statement that vaccines is for Americans first, that was not on. So I think there was a bit of let's say, unhappiness at the end of, at India's end, because at the end of the day, India did help the United States in the early days of the pandemic when it was battling, when it was struggling.
Well, that is true. Yes, when the pandemic sort of the outbreak sort of started in early 2020, when India was also under a lockdown, we remember how former US President Donald Trump gave a call to Prime Minister Modi, and we immediately sent them batches of hydroxychloroquine tablets. At that point of time, they needed that, so we gave it to them, and we also then sent it to several other countries. Having said that, it is also true that this time when India is facing such a crisis, it's also not really right to put the entire blame on US, right? It has also got to do with a lot of shortcoming that the government, the state government, of course, the central government had in terms of a lack of preparedness. Because if you remember, Ruhi, in October, November, December, and then on till at least till first week of March, it was as if everything has come back to normal, although the numbers were not really that encouraging, right? And then we had this election rallies, we had religious congregations. So and never really that sort of thought came in everybody's mind that there will be shortage of oxygen. I mean, right now, even as we speak, people are gasping for breath. There are deaths happening. So this is something that India needs to also take a lot of responsibility without, telling others that you did not help us. I mean, yes, the US delayed after a lot of pressure was built, but then the US is there. And now across the board, we've seen messaging happening that they are going to help us. But at the same time, when you when India boasts about the fact that it has a stellar foreign policy, you have a lot of Quad partnership between US, Australia, and Japan. The natural thing that came in everyone's mind that, why are these countries not helping? But let's not forget, these countries are also battling the COVID crisis as much as we are also battling, right? So, which is why the statement from US that we have to first see domestically. And let's not forget, I'm not defending US here, but this is a very new government administration that has come in place in January. We saw the Quad summit happening. But after that, everybody sort of went back and again started to address the crisis that was happening at home. And the US had, started vaccination for all age groups above 18. So they were focusing more on that. But even then, they have not said that we won't help. Yes, we have lost a lot of time, but I think now that help is going to come pretty soon.
Okay, so Rainima, let me just flip this question a little bit and ask you, you rightly mentioned this is a new administration now, and the fact that India has mismanaged the pandemic completely domestically is another point altogether. That is, I don't think there is any argument to that. We can see what's happening in the country, which is extremely tragic and unfortunate. But the fact that the US did delay to such an extent, and it was seen as dithering on helping not just a strategic ally, but a Quad partner. In that sense, was there a misstep on the part of the Biden administration, which, as you pointed out, is a new administration, and diplomacy at the end of the day is about responding to these things quickly?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Ruhi. But then at the same time, if you go, and I have spoken with a lot of sources that I have on both sides, is that India was also quite late in seeking help from the US. Now, one can really argue why the US was not proactive in helping India. But at the same time, when there's a pandemic and when there's a crisis happening, you need to really reach out to countries immediately and act, right? So we are hearing these multiple voices coming in from other aspects, from sources also in the government, that we were also late in approaching the US. It was only last week that we sort of raised the concerns with the Quad, and we've also done that story in ThePrint that it was only around the middle of last week that we raised the issues with the US bilaterally, as well as under the Quad framework. So, at this point of time, you need to really reach out immediately and be very quick and fast in doing so. Having said that, yes, you are right. When you consider India as your natural partner, when you consider, India as a like-minded country, is what we are hearing every day from the Ministry of External Affairs, that it is going to do business with like-minded countries, then the obvious question is, why did you not immediately seek help from your friend from India's side and also from America's side? Were you not seeing the numbers? Were you not really seeing the number of deaths? Because the international media is also reporting day and night of what is going on. So why were you not proactive in helping India? But at the same time, let's understand this DPA, which was first invoked by President Trump, is quite a complicated law, right? It's not easy to immediately give exception to another country. So all those discussions were going on. They reviewed the policy right after India raised it with the US, and now they have given us that exception.
Right. Okay. So this question is from Jayan Joshi. What is this raw material? Why was it withheld? So why was it withheld? We've understood, but what kind of raw materials are we talking about?
Yesterday, when the statement came late last night, from after the conversation between both the NSAs, it seemed that the US is talking about giving raw materials for Covishield. However, we've heard Mr. Poonawalla giving interviews to several other media platforms, and including to us, that they really need the raw material for some of their new vaccines that are coming up, especially Novavax, and there's something Covovax, which they are going to give it to the WHO under the commitment that they have there. So yes, I think that will be sort of sorted out between these two parties, between Serum Institute and the US, and with whom they are dealing with in that country. So these are the raw materials that you really require to ramp up vaccine production. But what we have heard Mr. Poonawalla stating is that it will not impact the Covishield as such. Now, even there, I would say that the government will really need to ramp up and see how production is scaled up, and how it will be distributed 1st May onwards. Even there, we will not be, in the sense, it will not be viable to blame US for that, because they are going to give the raw material for something else, unless the Serum Institute clarifies what exactly they wanted from the US and what is it that the US is sending. So, the statement came just yesterday. I'm sure all those areas will be cleared as we move from here.
Right. Okay. This is from a handle called at Aloka_1love. How come the USA has the entire stock of raw materials for vaccine, and why can't India procure it from other nations or sources?
So US, yes, we have heard even the US corporate sector and some of the strong business chambers there have asked the US that, the Biden administration is sitting on millions of doses of AstraZeneca vaccine, which they can easily ship to India. And I think that kind of decision will also be taken very soon, that some of the extra that they have vaccines that probably the US will not require can be sent to India as well as to Brazil, is what we've been hearing. So, the US done that production. We've heard under Quad there was this partnership for Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So all those areas really need to be clarified, not just by the US, but also by the Modi government as well, as to how much of vaccines you exactly need, and whether those orders have been placed with the US or not.
Right. Okay, I'll move on to some questions from YouTube now. There's a question from Sumit Gupta on the vaccination drive from May 1st. What impact will this have? Then there's one from Shubhajit Datta on how many people the government is targeting to vaccinate from 1st of May. So for our viewers, you can recap to our government matters from last week with Avantika Ghosh, who leads a health and COVID coverage. She gave us a detailed lowdown of what to expect from the 1st of May onwards. So that could be useful to you. Noinama, for you, let's take these two questions from Krish Vikram. One is whether it's true that Pfizer was pressurizing the US administration to not lift the ban. And the other is whether the US is trying to control the vaccine market by denying India vaccine manufacturing raw material.
Well, to the first question, yes, we have read these reports, and we are also hearing from some of our sources that, whenever it comes to the US, we cannot really rule out the role that is being played by the big pharma, right? And the kind of lobbying that they do. Having said that, it is also true that it has also come to the light that the US has a lot of extra vaccines, as I said, which they can easily ship. There is also this factor that is going on at the WTO, at the World Trade Organization, where India and South Africa has requested, especially to the US and the European Union, that let's have these vaccines free of all the intellectual property rights and patents, so that one can procure them easily. Because we need to understand that procuring these vaccines from the US or any of these developed countries is not easy. They have a lot of documents, IPR rules, and several other laws that govern them. So all that needs to be made easy for countries like India and others to access them.
Right. Okay. This one is from a handle called Mr. Lee. Why is the USA offering raw materials for Covishield? Didn't Mr. Poonawalla specifically ask for raw materials for Novavax?
So as I said in the statement yesterday, they said they'll be giving the raw materials to Covishield maker. So I'm sure they refer to Serum Institute, of course, but they did not really say that it will be for Covishield. Now, that is an issue that I'm sure Serum will be sorting out with the US. There's no confusion there. Of course, there won't be. Having said that, it's also true this won't impact, let's say, Ruhi, you and me or others who are waiting to get vaccinated now, May onwards. For that, I think the government should have made the preparations by now.
Already.
The spots are there. So
right.
I think for that, we cannot really blame the US, but I'm sure the government is ready to roll.
Right. This one is from Bruce Wayne. Does this kind of delay by the US harm India-US ties? So, that's really the larger question as we were talking about natural allies, partners in Quad. India-US are supposed to be much closer than they were even until 3 years ago, perhaps 3-4 years ago. So will this delay perhaps act as some kind of a dampener on the ties?
Well, yes, I mean, that goes without saying. It will really be remembered for a long time to come. I mean, I was just speaking with one of the former Indian ambassadors to the US, and he very clearly told me that, while all this were going on, memories of Cold War era came to mind when US was not looked upon, was not looked at by India as a reliable partner. So people have started talking to that level where the reliability of this partnership has also come into question. And I think this is something where both sides need to really gear up. But we've also seen some positive signals coming in, where we had the Quad summit, where India was, sort of not really forthcoming, but the Biden administration could convince Prime Minister Modi to have the summit in March. And there was this climate summit that happened. And very soon, probably on the sidelines of the G7, both these leaders will be meeting. Nobody knows how the COVID situation will be at that point of time. But then, yes, I mean, if you come really to the level of people, common man, this will stay on for a very long time, because remember, we really needed, India needed the help urgently. There were this rising number of deaths happening, shortage of medical supplies, oxygen, ventilators. So all these things will not really go away that easy. These are, after all, human lives.
Right. Okay, I have a flurry of questions, Vanima, but let me take a couple of last questions quickly. One is from Dips. Is the Biden administration still under the hang over the Modi-Trump extraordinary and unwanted bonhomie? So I think what this viewer perhaps is referring to is the kind of open endorsement of former President Donald Trump that we saw from Prime Minister Narendra Modi ahead of the US polls. And is that sort of still playing on the back of the mind of the Biden administration?
I would not really say that. That's a very easy question to really, solve. It's not really true. This is politics. We all know how global politics work. When Mr. Biden came to power, and even when he addressed, before coming to power, even last year, when he addressed the Indian American population, there he was very clear that India will be one of his priorities. And the fact that, at that time, he was also well aware of what had happened, at how they made Modi or Namaste Trump and all those things. But, one understands, in that kind of maturity, I'm sure US has, as well as India, that, when things change, when governments change, the relationship never really stops. And US and India has always enjoyed a bipartisan support, which is why we are seeing other things, as I said, that the Quad summit taking place, climate summit. We've also seen how the US is now wanting India to play a larger role when it comes to the Afghan peace talks with the Taliban. So all those things are there. But yes, this is what has happened in terms of the COVID crisis. I think this is something where the US was also trying to assess what is really going on in India, and the fact that everybody was talking about India coming out of the crisis, so to speak, but the scene sort of completely turned. So I think every country was assessing, but now we see not just the US, but also UK, Australia, even China and Pakistan. They've all come and they've all said that they will be helping India as much as they want.
Okay, let's close with this question from Chirag Gopinath. Does America see India as an emerging country like China, both as an ally and as a potential rival?
Well, yes. When it comes to doing a practical business, yes, US looks at India as an emerging economy, and that's what we are. So there's no shying away from that fact. At the same time, US also sees India as this reliable partner. which can be leveraged when it comes to their relationship with China, which is having a lot of tensions, not just under Trump era, but we've seen that has sort of accentuated under President Biden. So yes, the US really needs India, and this point of time we've seen with Indo-Pacific, and as I said, the Afghan peace talks. In terms of larger strategic relationship, India has always been close to US, and that has been happening for last over a decade now. So yes, I think when it comes to health partnership, I think that's one aspect that needs to be really worked upon, and that can only happen going forward if we really have a robust trading relationship with the US, which at this point of time is hugely lacking. India is not part of any big trade agreement, which is also a shortcoming for India, I would say, not just the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or other trade agreements. Yet India has, it now talks about creating a robust and resilient supply chain. So going forward, we really, this should serve as a lesson going forward, that how you can leverage these partnerships where the strategic tilt is, yes, huge, but when it comes to real need in terms of health or trading or any kind of other kind of aspect in a relationship, how can you leverage your strategic gains on that?
All right, Noinima, we have a bunch of questions which we unfortunately could not take, from Didarul Alam, from Pradeep Jaiswal, from Pranav Kakkar, Himanshu Borse, Pandu Shubham, a handle called Goosebumps, Sen Baga Muthu Rahul, Sanket Kulkarni, Mahip Tiwari. So really a bunch of questions. We are very grateful to our viewers for watching our show and for sending in these questions. Unfortunately, time constraints have prevented us from taking all the questions, but next time for sure. Thank you, Noinima, for being with us on Government Matters, for explaining this, what seemed like something that could put the India-US relations off track a little bit, but now it seems that things are